The dinner rush always felt like chaos stitched together by the thin thread of routine, but that evening, something in the air shifted the moment the door swung open. It wasn't the cold wind dragging itself inside. It wasn't the dull chatter of customers that suddenly paused in mid-sentence. It was him. The kind of presence that swallowed a room whole long before anyone recognized the face attached to it. Alexander Blackwell. People didn't say his name. They lowered their voices around it, like uttering it too loudly might summon something dangerous. Billionaire, investor, corporate surgeon who sliced failing companies apart and stitched them back into gold. He was the kind of man who was photographed stepping out of private jets the way normal people were photographed stepping out of buses. He didn't just walk into a place, he shifted the gravity around him. The hostess nearly tripped over her own shoes while leading him inside. The cooks peered through the kitchen window like wildlife spotting a predator. Even the regulars, the loud ones who always drank more than they tipped, went quiet, and in the middle of this frozen storm, Lena adjusted the strap of her apron and breathed out slowly. She had seen wealthy customers before, rich tourists, executives who couldn't look past the glow of their phone screens. People who carried entitlement like perfume. But this man was different. You could feel his presence before you even fully saw him, like the heavy thud of a bass line behind a wall. Still, she didn't flinch. She didn't have the luxury of flinching. Bills didn't care whether a billionaire was seated at table 7. Rent didn't care if her hands shook. Life certainly didn't care that she had already worked a double shift and her legs felt like they belonged to a sleep-deprived mannequin. She needed the money. She needed the hours. She needed the job. So she walked toward him. Her steps were steady even though her heart was beating a little too loudly. The dining room lights were dim, but his presence glowed like a warning sign. He had chosen a booth in the corner, strategic, isolated, controlled. A place where he could observe without being observed. A place kings would sit if kings still sat in restaurants. He didn't look up when she approached. He was studying the menu with a sharpness that made the laminated paper seem like it was hiding stock market secrets. His jaw was carved in a way that suggested he rarely smiled, not out of unhappiness, but because he didn't have reasons to waste energy on the unnecessary. Lena stopped at the edge of the table, pulled out her notepad, and forced her voice into the shape of something professional. Good evening, sir. What can I get you to start? Nothing. No reply. He simply lifted his eyes slowly, as though deciding whether this moment deserved his attention. Their gazes met, and the restaurant, for one stretched out second, went completely silent. Inside her mind, she had expected coldness. She had expected entitlement. She had prepared herself for impatience. But what she saw in his eyes was calculation. Not unkind, but unmistakably analytical. He was looking at her the way people look at paintings they're trying to interpret. Then, finally, he spoke. You know what? His voice was low, rich, and sharpened by effortless confidence. Surprise me. She blinked. Surprise him. Customers rarely gave that kind of open-ended request. They wanted specifics, substitutions, alterations, rules. But this man wanted entertainment. She nodded, writing down nothing, because a surprise wasn't something you wrote, it was something you created. And, he added, leaning back in the booth, while you're at it, give me some financial advice. There was a small curl to his lips now. A dangerous one. Not cruel, but amused. A joke flickering between them like a match flame. He wasn't mocking her exactly, more like testing her. The way a bored chess master tests a stranger who sits across from him. The cooks peeked again, whispering harshly, is he serious? Financial advice. To a waitress, it would have been easy to laugh awkwardly. To pretend she didn't hear him. To brush it off with a shy smile and escape back to the safety of the kitchen. But Lena wasn't built out of easy. She stood there, still as a held breath, letting his words settle instead of falling apart under them. In her 22 years of life, she had learned one thing with painful clarity: people in power rarely saw those beneath them. Their eyes looked, but they didn't see. Their ears heard, but they didn't listen. She watched him watching her, waiting for her to stutter, to blush, to crumble. Instead, she set her pen down. Her voice, when it came out, was soft, but solid. My first advice. He raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting something timid or amusing. She leaned in, not close enough to be rude, but close enough to make sure her words struck with precision. Stop mistaking people's silence for stupidity. For the first time, the billionaire's expression flickered, not annoyance, not offense, something else. Something that lived in the thin space between surprise and realization. He stared at her, and the room shrank into a smaller, tighter bubble, just the two of them and the echo of her sentence. The men who intimidated CEOs, who negotiated with oil magnates and world leaders, who sat on panels with economists whose names filled textbooks. He actually seemed at a loss. She straightened again, gathering her notepad and tightening her apron strap like she hadn't just thrown a verbal stone into a billionaire's private ocean. "I'll bring your drink in a moment," she said, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But something extraordinary had happened. The cooks were frozen. A couple in the next booth stared openly. A manager standing by the cashier's desk whispered a prayer that she still had a job, and Alexander Blackwell did not speak. He watched her walk toward the kitchen, his eyes tracking her with a kind of silent curiosity that didn't match the sharp edges of the persona the world had painted him into. His fingertips drummed lightly on the table, not impatient, but thoughtful. Like he was replaying her sentence in his head. "Stop mistaking people's silence for stupidity." Lena didn't look back as she filled a glass with water, her hand steadier than most people's would have been after speaking to a billionaire like that. She had spent her life dealing with people who believed money made them superior. She had learned to recognize the tone, the patronizing one disguised as humor. She had learned to ignore it. She had learned to swallow her reactions, smile politely, and continue surviving. But something about the way he had said it, the lightness of the joke, the expectation behind it, had stirred something she didn't expect. She returned to his table and placed the glass down gently. "Your surprise will be out soon," she said. He looked at the water, then at her, then back at the water again, as if searching for the correct reaction inside the reflection. "I wasn't expecting a real answer," he admitted quietly. "Then you shouldn't have asked," she replied, without hostility. A beat, a breath, a shift in atmosphere. The billionaire's smirk melted into something more honest, an expression faintly touched by respect, or maybe intrigue, or maybe the dawning awareness that he'd misjudged the situation entirely. Lena turned to leave again, but his voice followed her. "What would make you say something like that?" She paused, her back still to him, her hand resting briefly on the edge of a table. "Because I've spent my whole life around people who did it." That was the real answer. But she didn't give it to him. Instead, she said, "You'd be surprised what people learn when they've had to listen more than they speak." When she disappeared into the kitchen again, he exhaled for the first time in minutes. The restaurant began moving again, sounds returning, conversations resuming, forks clinking against plates. But Alexander's mind remained wrapped in those few, simple words spoken by a waitress who didn't flinch under the weight of him. He came in expecting dinner. He came in expecting boredom. He came in expecting to be entertained by the smallness of the world he visited when he felt like seeing how the other half lived. He didn't expect to be challenged. He didn't expect to be questioned. He certainly didn't expect a truth sharp enough to slip under his armor. For the first time all week, maybe all month, he felt the faint spark of something unfamiliar, curiosity, about her, about the life behind those steady eyes, about why her single sentence had cut through the noise of his world so cleanly. As the minutes stretched on and the hum of the restaurant rose around him, Alexander Blackwell realized something he had never allowed himself to feel inside a place like this. He was waiting for her words. For the next unexpected thing she would say, and the billionaire who had built an empire on predictability found himself strangely eager to be surprised again. Alexander didn't know how long he sat there, fingers tapping lightly against the cool surface of the table, replaying the same sentence over and over like a song stuck in his head. He had heard financial advice from world-renowned economists. He'd listened to speeches from analysts who charged thousands per hour. He had received investment insights from people whose credentials stretched across 2 business cards, but none of their words lingered the way a single line from a waitress did. "Stop mistaking people's silence for stupidity." It wasn't just clever. It wasn't just sharp. It was personal, almost uncomfortably so. It pierced through something he didn't even realize was exposed. He picked up the water glass she'd placed in front of him, turning it in his hand, watching the way the light fractured through it. He wasn't really seeing the water. He was seeing her face, the calmness, the certainty, the absolute lack of fear. Most people trembled around him. They stuttered. They sweat. They moved like they were trying to prove their worth with every breath, but she had simply existed, without shrinking. He found himself wondering what kind of life forged someone like that. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Lena leaned against the counter, trying to quiet her pulse. She didn't regret what she'd said. She never regretted honesty. But she was still human, and speaking so boldly to a man whose net worth had its own gravitational field was not something she did daily. Her coworker, Hannah, slid next to her, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and horror. "Did you just—" "Yes," Lena said, before she could finish to him. "Yes. And you're alive. For now." They both exhaled half-laughs, though Lena's sounded more like a release of tension than amusement, but underneath her calm exterior, there was something else stirring, something she didn't want to acknowledge. Because whenever she thought back to the look he'd given her, it unsettled her in ways she wasn't prepared to feel. Her manager burst through the swinging door, breathless and panicked. "Lena. Table 7. Did you, what exactly happened?" She wiped her hands on her apron. "Nothing. He asked for financial advice, and I gave him a sentence." "A sentence? A sentence?" The manager looked like he was debating fainting or screaming. "That's Alexander Blackwell. Do you know who he is?" "Yes," Lena said simply. "I know who he is." "Then why would you talk to him like that?" "Because he asked." The manager stared at her for a long moment, then dragged a hand over his face. Well, you'd better pray he finds it charming, or we'll all be jobless by morning." But when Lena peeked through the small circular window in the kitchen door, what she saw didn't look like a man planning to ruin lives. He was sitting with his hands folded under his chin, eyes unfocused, as though deep in thought, and that worried her more, because a man like him thinking about someone like her didn't make sense. She turned away from the window and busied herself plating the dish she'd chosen to surprise him with, simple, comforting, unpretentious. Something real. Something grounded. Something that would either amuse him or confuse him. She carried it out gracefully, placing it in front of him with a professionalism that hid every thought swirling in her mind. At the plate, then at her. "This is your surprise?" "Yes," she answered. "And I can promise it's not stupid." A tiny spark lit behind his eyes at that, like he appreciated the subtle callback to her earlier words. He picked up the fork, took the first bite, and paused. She didn't smirk. She didn't wait anxiously for praise. She simply stood there, giving him space to react. Finally, he swallowed and said, "It's unexpectedly good." That's how surprises usually work. A ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, barely there but undeniable. She turned to leave again, but this time his voice followed her with a gentleness she didn't expect. "Sit for a moment." She stopped. Her instincts told her to say no. Her dignity told her she wasn't an ornament hired to be entertaining. Her exhaustion told her she didn't have time, but something else, something she didn't have a name for, told her to turn back. She met his gaze. "I'm working. I'll compensate the restaurant for your time." She shook her head. "I'm not for sale." That stopped him completely. His eyebrows lifted, and he sat up straighter, almost as if someone had yanked a thread in his spine. People didn't say that to him. People stumbled over themselves to sell him their time, their ideas, their morals if necessary, and yet she stood there, steady as ever. Then she did something he didn't expect. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down anyway. "But," she said softly, "I'll talk because you're listening. Not because you can afford me." The restaurant didn't freeze this time. It simply blurred around them, fading into background noise as if someone had turned the world's volume knob down to 0. Alexander shifted, suddenly feeling unsure of where to place his hands. He wasn't nervous, he didn't get nervous, but he felt unpracticed. Conversationally clumsy. Like he had walked into a language he was fluent in on paper but not in real life. He cleared his throat. "Earlier, you said finance is trust. That losing trust means losing everything." She nodded. "Where did that come from?" he asked. She ran her finger along the edge of the table, tracing invisible patterns. "My father," she said quietly. "He trusted the wrong person. A man in a suit who smiled too easily and shook hands without meaning it. And he lost money." "He lost everything," she corrected. "Including himself." Alexander listened without interrupting. She noticed that. Most people waited for their turn to speak. He simply listened. "He used to be confident," she continued. "Warm. Someone who believed the world was full of good people. Then one mistake, one misplaced trust, destroyed years of work. It changed him. Changed us." Alexander inhaled slowly. "I'm sorry." You don't have to be, she replied. You didn't do it. She didn't say it bitterly. Just factually. But Alexander felt the weight of it anyway, like guilt had a way of echoing in places it didn't belong. And you, he said softly. What did you take from it? That people show you who they are when they think they don't need anything from you. He closed his eyes for a second because those words, those precise, piercing words, hit a place inside him he usually kept locked. People always needed something from him. They always approached him with manufactured friendliness and expertly rehearsed admiration. His life was a minefield of hidden agendas, flattery, and expectation. No one ever spoke to him without wanting something back, except her. He leaned forward slightly. And what do you think I want right now? She looked into his eyes. Really looked. And it startled him how easily she read him. You want to feel something different, she said. Something real. Even if you don't know how to name it. Air tightened in his lungs. She wasn't wrong. He didn't know why he needed her words, but he did. He didn't know why he cared what she thought, but he did. This conversation felt like something fragile, something genuine, something that couldn't be replicated in boardrooms or luxury suites. He realized, with startling clarity, that she was giving him something no one else dared to give, truth without fear. He found himself asking, and if I wanted to change the way people see me? You can't control how people see you, she replied. Only how you see them. He blinked slowly, absorbing that. Then what should I start with? She didn't hesitate. Start by listening when people speak. Even if you think they have nothing to teach you. He felt something warm unfold in his chest. Humbling. Strange. Almost painful, like untying a knot he didn't realize had been strangling him. She stood up gently. I should get back to work. He didn't try to stop her. He just watched her walk away, the weight of her words settling deeper and deeper into him. He wondered how someone so young carried such depth. He wondered how many storms she had survived to speak like that. He wondered why he felt lighter and heavier all at once. He looked down at his plate, at the simple meal she'd chosen without hesitation. It tasted like warmth. Like normalcy. Like a world he hadn't visited in years, and for the first time in a very long time, the billionaire who had built an empire through precision and logic felt something he rarely let himself feel. He felt human. Lena returned to her tasks, pretending nothing had shifted between them. But as she wiped down a counter, she caught her own reflection in a shiny metal panel and paused, because her eyes looked different somehow, softer, worried, curious. She didn't want curiosity. Not about him. Not about someone whose life existed galaxies away from hers, but curiosity had already slipped between her ribs and settled quietly, and neither of them realized it yet, but that one conversation, those 10 minutes, had already begun rewriting the trajectory of both their lives. Alexander stayed long after Lena returned to her duties, but not in the way customers usually lingered. There was no tapping impatience, no checking his watch, no pulling out his phone to scroll through the markets or review contracts. He just sat there, watching the world move around him, the chatter, the clinking silverware, the laughter from the table near the window, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was observing life instead of sprinting past it. He didn't know how she had slipped under his guard so quietly. He didn't understand why her words echoed louder than the advisory board he paid millions to. It bothered him in a way that awakened something he had forgotten how to feel. Meanwhile, Lena wiped down tables, refilled drinks, and delivered meals with the same quiet efficiency she always did, but her eyes betrayed her. Every few minutes, without entirely meaning to, she scanned the room to see if he was still there. He always was, and not once did his gaze drift to anyone else. Minutes stretched into nearly an hour before he finally stood. The room seemed to straighten itself around him instinctively, as though aware of the power that rose with him. He slipped on his jacket, adjusted his cuffs, and walked toward the front door, but his steps slowed when he passed her. For a moment, the noise of the restaurant dimmed again, the way it had earlier, like their presence distorted the air. She lifted her gaze. Did you enjoy your meal? She asked, her voice even, polite. Yes, he answered, but something in the way he said it made it sound like he wasn't talking about the food at all. Before she could respond, he reached into his coat. She expected a tip, maybe an extravagant one, maybe a polite one, maybe something excessive that would make her uncomfortable. Instead, he pulled out a small, simple business card. No gold trim, no glossy finish. Just his name, his personal number, and a single email address. He placed it gently on the table beside the register. If you have time tomorrow, he said quietly, come to my office. Her breath caught, but her face stayed calm. For what purpose? He hesitated, and that alone startled her. Men like him didn't hesitate unless something mattered. Because I'd like your insight on something, he said. And I don't mean financial insight. She blinked. You want my, what, personal opinion? I want, he clarified, meeting her eyes, the truth you gave me today. More of it. She didn't speak, and for a moment he mistook her silence for refusal. But she wasn't refusing, she was studying him, the same way he had studied her earlier. And it unnerved him more than any billion-dollar negotiation ever had. Finally, she said, I'll think about it. He nodded, accepting that she wasn't a person to be rushed or bought. Then he left. The moment the door closed behind him, the entire restaurant released a long, collective breath. The tension evaporated like steam off a boiling pot. Hannah rushed over, nearly tripping on a chair. Tell me you're joking, she hissed. Tell me he did not just give you his personal card. Lena held up the small rectangle, staring at it like it was something dangerous. A business card was not a curse. It was not a blessing. It was an opportunity, or a trap, depending on where you stood in life. He wants you to go to his office. Hannah squealed, grabbing the card to read it. Lena, this is insane. This man could offer you a job. He could be playing games, Lena cut in, her voice steady. Men like him are used to entertainment. But he didn't look entertained, Hannah argued. He looked, I don't know, like someone unplugged him and plugged him back in. Lena didn't laugh. Her thumb ran along the edge of the card. She didn't want to be hopeful. Hope was expensive. Hope cost time, energy, disappointment, and she wasn't sure she had enough left to spare. But she also couldn't deny that his offer wasn't flirtation. It wasn't pity. It wasn't some cheap attempt at charm. It felt genuine, and that terrified her more than anything else. She tucked the card deep into her apron, finished her shift, and walked home through the cool night. The city's lights flickered against puddles left behind by the afternoon rain. Cars passed. People laughed outside bars. A couple argued quietly, thinking no one could hear them. Life continued, vast and uncaring, but inside her chest, she carried a small storm. When she reached her apartment, a cramped studio with peeling paint and a fridge that hummed too loudly, she dropped onto her sagging couch and took out the card again. Alexander Blackwell, personal line. People would think she was insane for hesitating. People dreamed of chances like this, being noticed by someone with power. Being offered a seat at a table you never believed you'd get near, but she had lived long enough to know that powerful people rarely did anything without a reason. And the ones who offered something for free always expected something invisible in return. Still, the look in his eyes, she couldn't shake it. He wasn't looking for entertainment. He wasn't looking for flattery. He wasn't looking for control. He was looking for direction. She had seen that look before, but never in someone like him. Hours later, she finally fell asleep with the card on her nightstand, its sharp corners glinting faintly in the moonlight like a silent decision waiting to happen. The next morning came fast. She woke to her alarm blaring, the same routine waiting for her: shower, cheap coffee, a walk to work. But something felt different. The city seemed louder. Her heartbeat seemed louder. The card in her bag seemed louder. The restaurant, she moved through her tasks with mechanical precision, but her thoughts were constantly drifting. By noon, she couldn't stand it anymore. She wiped her hands, pulled the card out, and stared at the number again. You're going, aren't you? Whispered beside her, eyebrows raised. I don't know, Lena said. You do know, Hannah insisted. You just don't want to admit it. Lena exhaled slowly. Every instinct told her to stay in her lane. To avoid risks. To keep her head down, work hard, and survive. But there was a smaller, quieter voice, one she'd ignored for years, telling her this wasn't a trap. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't ambition. It was a chance to use her voice in a way she never had before. She stepped outside into the alley behind the restaurant, dialed the number with trembling fingers, and held the phone to her ear. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then his voice came through, calm, controlled, unmistakable. Alexander Blackwell. She swallowed. It's Lena. Silence. Not a cold silence, but a surprised one. You called, he said softly, almost like he didn't believe it. I did, she answered. But only because I want to know something. What is it? What do you want from me? This time, the silence was longer. You can hang up if this sounds wrong, he finally said. But I want your perspective. I want real opinions from someone who has nothing to gain from lying to me. That's all, she asked cautiously. That's all, he said. For now. For now, she repeated. He didn't push. He didn't beg. He didn't manipulate. So she breathed in, breathed out, and said the words that would change the course of both their lives. I'll come by after my shift. She arrived at his office building hours later, feeling absurdly small as she walked into the towering structure of glass and steel. The lobby alone looked like it belonged in a movie: marble floors, gold accents, a receptionist who probably made more money than she did. But when she stepped out of the elevator on the top floor, everything shifted again. Alexander was waiting for her at the end of the hallway, hands in his pockets, no jacket, no entourage, no boardroom armor. Just him. And when he saw her, something in his expression softened, not into a smile, but into something realer. You came, he said quietly. I did, she said, just as quietly. He stepped aside, gesturing toward his office. Inside, she saw walls lined with awards, shelves filled with rare books, massive windows overlooking the entire city, but the atmosphere felt strangely human. Like she had been invited into a part of him even he rarely visited. He motioned for her to sit. She didn't. She walked to the window instead. You look at all this every day, she asked. Yes. And it doesn't feel lonely? He froze, because no one, not employees, not partners, not even friends, had ever asked him that. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. Yes, he admitted softly. It does. She turned around, and in that moment, standing in his kingdom, in his skyscraper throne room, she looked at him the same way she had the first night, without fear. You want my advice, she said. He nodded. Then stop building walls so high that even you can't climb out. He swallowed. And the second piece of advice? She held his gaze and whispered, start listening to people before you lose the ones worth hearing. He inhaled like her words were oxygen he'd forgotten how to take in. She walked toward the door, not waiting for praise, not waiting for anything. But before she could leave, he said her name, Lena. She stopped. I don't want this to be a one-time conversation. She didn't turn around. What do you want it to be? A beginning, he said, her heart pushed hard against her ribs. She finally looked at him over her shoulder. I'll think about it, she said, a quiet echo of the night before. And when she left the office, Alexander stood alone in the silence she left behind, realizing something he had never allowed himself to feel, not in boardrooms, not in victories, not in fortune. He wanted more of her words, more of her truth, more of her presence. And for the first. No one at the gala noticed the way Adrian's fingers kept tapping against the side of his glass, a barely contained storm disguised as elegance. Only Elena, who stood beside him, watching the crowd with her usual quiet stillness, could sense the tension radiating off him. He wasn't angry. No, anger would have been easier. What he felt was something far more dangerous for a man like him: uncertainty, and uncertainty was something Adrian Blackwell had never allowed in his world. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, the kind of glow meant to flatter wealth and hide intent. Glittering gowns drifted across marble floors. Conversations overlapped with laughter polished to perfection. But beneath all that sheen, every person in the room wanted something: power, validation, connections. Adrian had been part of this world for so long he had forgotten it was possible to exist outside its constant bargaining. Until Elena, she wasn't supposed to be here. Not in a place like this where alliances were made with lies coated in charm. Yet she stood here in a simple navy dress, her hair loosely curled, her eyes steady, completely unashamed of her lack of diamonds, her lack of pedigree, her lack of anything this room would consider valuable. And somehow, she was the most magnetic person present. Stop staring at me like that, she whispered without looking his way. I'm not staring, Adrian responded, eyes fixed on her profile. You're glaring very intensely at the side of my face. I'm thinking. That's worse. He huffed, an involuntary exhale, the closest thing to a laugh he'd had all night. The charity gala had been his idea. He wanted to show her his world, the reality of it, not the headlines, not the assumptions, but the truth. He wanted her to see who he really was when surrounded by the kind of people who expected him to remain untouchable. He wanted her to choose him knowing exactly what she would be stepping into, but he had forgotten one thing: people like those in this ballroom did not appreciate change. They noticed everything, especially the presence of someone who didn't fit the usual mold of Adrian's companions. The whispers had begun the moment she walked in beside him. Is she new? She's not even dressed properly. Did he lose a bet? He never brings dates here. Why her? It was supposed to roll off him. He didn't care what anyone thought. But for the first time in years, he felt protective, not of his name, not of his image, but of Elena, who pretended not to notice the glances yet silently tightened her grip on her clutch. I'm fine, she murmured, sensing his rising tension. You shouldn't have to say that. His voice dropped lower. You shouldn't have to pretend you don't hear them. She finally turned to face him. Adrian, it doesn't bother me. I'm used to being underestimated. He hated that. Not her strength, but the world that made her need it. He wanted to say something comforting, something that would make all of this worth it, but before he could speak, a tall woman in a shimmering gold gown glided toward them, a practiced smile on her face. Adrian, she greeted warmly, pressing a kiss to his cheek. It's been too long. Valerie, he acknowledged, guarded. Elena had heard the name before. Valerie Chen, investment mogul, family friend, and one of the many sharks who circled Adrian in business and social life alike. Valerie's attention slid to Elena, her expression shifting subtly, still polite, but with a thin layer of curiosity. And you must be, Elena, she said, offering a small smile. Ah. Valerie's smile widened as if confirming a rumor. The waitress. Elena froze for half a second, just long enough for Adrian to notice, but before he could intervene, Elena nodded. Yes. That's me. Valerie's eyebrows lifted slightly, clearly surprised. Elena wasn't flustered, embarrassed, or scrambling to explain herself. Interesting, she murmured. Then she turned to Adrian with a teasing smirk. I must say, this is unexpected. You never struck me as the type to bring novelty to these events. Something darkened behind Adrian's eyes. She's not a novelty. Oh, don't be dramatic, Valerie laughed. I only meant she's refreshingly authentic. Definitely not from our circles. Elena straightened, ready to excuse herself before Adrian could get angrier, but Valerie wasn't finished. And tell me, she said, folding her arms, are you the one giving Adrian financial advice these days? I heard quite the story. There it was, the joke, the moment that started everything. Elena inhaled slowly, but she didn't look away. I wasn't giving advice, she said calmly. I simply answered a question he asked. Valerie laughed softly, clearly amused. Well, darling, let me offer you some advice in return. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a tone meant to sound kind but carried a sting. Men like Adrian, they live in a different world. They date for convenience, not disruption. So enjoy this while it lasts. Elena's chest tightened, but her face didn't betray it. Adrian's jaw clenched. Valerie, he warned, voice like steel, but Elena touched his arm lightly, a signal to let her speak. Thank you, she said to Valerie, her tone unbelievably steady. And let me offer you something too. Oh. Valerie arched a brow. Elena smiled, not sweet, not passive, but calm and razor-sharp. When you build your worth on titles and rooms that only accept you because of your net value, you'll always fear people who don't need a price tag to belong. Valerie blinked, caught off guard. Elena continued, I may not fit your world. But I don't need to. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm simply here with him. And I know something you seem to have forgotten. And what's that? Valerie asked, though her voice had lost some of its bite. Elena looked up at Adrian, then back at her. The value of a person isn't determined by where they come from, but by what they bring out in the people around them. It was quiet, too quiet. A few nearby guests had overheard, pausing their conversations. Valerie's expression flickered, offended. Impressed? It was hard to tell. Finally, she smoothed her dress and gave a small nod. Well, she said softly, you certainly don't lack confidence. I've lived too much of my life without it, Elena replied, with a faint smile that revealed nothing of what she truly thought. Valerie excused herself and drifted back into the crowd. Adrian released a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. That, he whispered, turning toward Elena, was remarkable. She shrugged. I wasn't trying to impress her. That's exactly why you did. But he could see the faint stress in her fingers, the way she momentarily looked toward the exit before stopping herself. You didn't deserve that, Adrian said gently. It's fine. Really? I knew what I was walking into. That doesn't make it acceptable. Her eyes softened as she studied him. Adrian. I don't need you to protect me. I know, he said quietly. But I want to. Before she could respond, his business partner, Nolan Grayson, approached with a stiff expression. Adrian, he said, not even acknowledging Elena, we have a problem. Adrian straightened instantly. What kind of problem? Nolan pulled him aside slightly. The investors want reassurance. Word is spreading that you're distracted. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Distracted. Nolan glanced at Elena as if she were a variable. They're concerned this new emotional entanglement might affect your focus. A cold, familiar anger began to burn in Adrian's chest. Elena heard it. He hadn't tried to hide it. Her pulse hammered, but she didn't move. I'm not obligated to live my life according to their insecurities, Adrian said, voice low, lethal. Nolan sighed. We both know how the board thinks. They're questioning your judgment. I'm only warning you because if this continues, if what continues. Adrian stepped closer. Me being happy. Nolan straightened stiffly. You need to think carefully about how this looks. Appearances matter, Adrian. They always have. Elena finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. If I'm a problem, I can step out. Adrian turned to her so fast Nolan actually blinked. You're not stepping anywhere, Adrian said. I decide who belongs in my life, not a room of people who only care about their stock portfolios. Nolan's jaw tightened. Then be prepared for consequences. He walked away. Adrian exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. Elena stepped closer, lowering her voice. Adrian, you don't need to fight everyone. I will, he said, if they make you feel unwelcome. She shook her head. This isn't just about me. They're scared because I don't fit. And I won't pretend I do. And I don't want you to. Then what? She asked gently. What do we do now? Adrian looked around, the glittering room, the hungry eyes, the polished cruelty disguised as sophistication. Then he looked at Elena, standing there in her simple dress with her unshakable calm, and he realized something he'd been resisting for weeks. He didn't just want her. He needed her. For the first time in his life, he wanted a future that wasn't dictated by expectations, profits, or public image. He wanted something real, something only she could give him. Elena, he said quietly, taking her hand, stay with me. In the ballroom. No, he said, his voice softening. In my life. Her breath caught. He wasn't being dramatic. He wasn't being impulsive. He meant every word. But before she could respond, before she could say yes or break his heart, a voice cut through the air behind them. One that froze both of them. Adrian. They turned. Standing there was a man Adrian hadn't seen in years. A ghost from a past he had never wanted Elena to know, and the look in the man's eyes made it clear, he had come to ruin everything. Adrian hadn't heard that voice in nearly a decade, yet the instant it cut through the air behind him, every muscle in his body went rigid. Memories he had locked away, buried beneath empire building, ruthless ambition, polished success, rose like ghosts he could no longer outrun. Elena sensed the shift instantly. His fingers loosened from hers, not because he wanted to let go, but because shock made him forget he was still holding her. Slowly, Adrian turned, and there he was, Lucas Hale, once his closest friend. His first business partner. The man who knew every mistake Adrian had made on his way up, and had once threatened to destroy him with that knowledge. He looked unchanged in the ways that mattered, sharp suit, sharper eyes, a smirk that didn't reach his face. But there was something else too. Something harder. Life hadn't been gentle with him, but it hadn't broken him either. Hello, Adrian, Lucas said softly, almost casually. It's been a while. Adrian's voice was low, steady, but carrying the warning of a storm. Not long enough. Lucas chuckled. Still dramatic. Good to know success hasn't changed that. Elena instinctively stepped closer to Adrian, though she didn't touch him. His tension was so loud she could almost feel it humming in the air. Lucas noticed her immediately. His eyes flicked to her dress, her posture, her lack of jewelry. His smirk widened. And who might this be? She doesn't look like your usual crowd. Before Adrian could shut him down, Elena answered simply. Elena. Ah, Lucas said, as if the name already confirmed a suspicion. The woman I've been hearing all sorts of whispers about tonight. Adrian's hands curled into fists, subtle but visible to her. Lucas, if you're here to start something, relax, Lucas cut in, lifting a hand. I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here for a conversation. His gaze slid back to Elena. One that involves both of you. Elena frowned slightly. I don't even know you. No, Lucas said. But you will. Adrian moved between them instinctively, blocking her view of Lucas. Whatever you think you came here to say, you're going to say it to me. Not her. Lucas's smirk returned, thin and sharp. Protective. That's new. You never got that way about anyone before. Lucas, Adrian warned, fine, fine. Lucas adjusted his cufflinks, then lowered his voice. Walk with me. 2 minutes. That's all. I'm not leaving her. Elena touched his arm lightly. It's okay, she whispered. I'll wait right here. He hesitated, torn between refusing and shielding her from whatever Lucas was about to say. It's fine, she repeated softly. I'm not afraid. Adrian wasn't convinced, but Lucas was right about one thing. This confrontation had been a long time coming. He exhaled sharply and nodded. 2 minutes, he growled. And if you try anything, Lucas laughed. Still assuming the worst. Let's go. They stepped several meters away, just enough for privacy, though Elena could still see Adrian's back, rigid, tense, ready to strike. Lucas didn't waste time. You've made a mistake, he said. Adrian scoffed. The only mistake I made was trusting you years ago. Oh, Adrian, Lucas sighed. Still clinging to old resentment. This is about something much more current. I'm listening. Lucas's expression sharpened. Your board is nervous. Investors are whispering. Your focus is slipping. My focus is fine. Lucas arched a brow. Is it? You're making decisions based on emotion. You're changing plans. You're thinking like a man in love. Adrian didn't react, but his silence was reaction enough. Lucas continued, voice calm but cold. Men like you don't have the luxury of attachment. Especially not to someone like her. Adrian's jaw tensed. Someone like her. You know exactly what I mean, Lucas said. A nobody. A waitress. A woman with no pedigree, no connections, nothing to anchor your reputation. He leaned in slightly. This is reckless. And I'm telling you this because I've seen what happens when you let your guard down around the wrong person. Adrian didn't blink. Elena isn't wrong. Lucas sighed again, more impatient this time. I'm not your enemy. You tried to blackmail me. That was a misunderstanding. You tried to sell my company's early plans. I was desperate. You left before I could fire you. And you built an empire while I spent years clawing my way out of the hole you kicked me into. Lucas's voice finally cracked with something raw. You owe me nothing. I owe you nothing. But I'm here because your downfall benefits no one, including me. Adrian stared at him, silent but raging. Lucas lowered his voice again. This isn't about her as a person. She may be sweet, smart, whatever. But optics matter. You know that. You taught me that. Adrian didn't move. Lucas pressed on. People are watching you, Adrian. And they see a powerful man slipping. All because of a woman who doesn't belong in your world. Adrian spoke finally, voice low, dangerous. Elena belongs wherever she chooses. Lucas blinked, stunned by the conviction. Adrian continued, and I don't care if investors, the board, or the entire empire collapses under the weight of their expectations. What I won't do, ever, is let this world turn her into something she's not. Lucas studied him for a long moment. You're serious? Dead serious. Lucas's tone softened, not kindly, but almost regretfully. Then I need to tell you something. A warning, whether you want it or not. Adrian didn't respond, but Lucas took the silence as permission. There's someone on your board, he said quietly. Someone who doesn't just disapprove of her. Someone who's planning to use her to get to you. Adrian's blood chilled. Who? Lucas shook his head. Not here. But you need to prepare yourself. They're going to set her up. Drag her through the media. Make her look like she manipulated you, like she's draining your money, like she's an opportunist. Elena. Targeted. Attacked. Used as leverage. A rage deeper than anything he'd felt in years rose like fire. If they touch her, you won't be able to protect her from everything, Lucas said quietly. Not in your world. Not with the enemies you've made. Adrian clenched his fists. Then I'll destroy them first. Lucas gave a slow, sad smile. And that, Adrian, is exactly what they're counting on. Adrian froze. Lucas stepped back. I've given you my warning. Do what you want with it. Before he could respond, Lucas turned and walked away, leaving Adrian standing in the middle of the ballroom with the crushing realization Elena wasn't just in danger. He had put her there. When he returned to her, Elena looked up immediately. Are you okay? No, he admitted, her eyes softened. Adrian, what did he say? He hesitated. She sensed it. Tell me. He drew a breath, his chest tight. Someone is planning to go after you. To use you against me. She didn't flinch. Not even a fraction. Okay, she said quietly. Then we deal with it. You're not scared of them. She shook her head. No, he exhaled shakily. Elena, you don't understand how cruel this world can get. I do, she whispered. I grew up in one much worse. He stared at her, stunned by her resilience. Somehow, her calm steadied him. I won't let them hurt you, he said, voice firm, almost desperate. She stepped closer. Then don't run. Don't hide. And don't push me away thinking it's protecting me. His breath hitched. She knew him too well. My entire life, she said softly, people saw me as someone small. Someone useless. Someone easy to overlook. But you didn't. So don't start now. His heart clenched. Elena, she placed her hand gently over his. If your world wants a fight, then they picked the wrong woman. Adrian's throat tightened. I don't want you to fight for me. I'm not, she said. I'm fighting with you. The ballroom around them blurred. The music, the whispers, the glitter, it all faded. Only she remained, only this moment remained. He pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw, not caring what rumors would spread. She melted against him, steady and sure, as if she knew exactly what he needed without him saying it, and for the first time that night, Adrian didn't feel the world closing in. He felt it expanding. Danger still waited. Enemies still circled. A war was coming, one that would not leave any of their lives untouched. But with her hand in his, her voice steady, her resolve unshaken, Adrian felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, hope, and he knew the truth then. Whatever storm was coming, they would face it together. The storm arrived faster than either of them expected. It didn't roar into their lives with explosions or dramatic confrontations. It seeped in quietly, like water through a cracked foundation, until suddenly everything around them was flooded. Elena felt the shift before she understood it. It began with the way people in the cafe looked at her, too long, too curious, too knowing. Her co-workers whispered, trying to hide their questions behind polite smiles. Customers who had once ignored her suddenly stared as if they were trying to match her face with something they'd seen online. She brushed it off or tried to, but the truth was, something had changed, and by the time she reached her apartment late that evening, tired from a long day, she found it. Someone had slipped an envelope under her door. Her name wasn't written on it. There was no address, just a thin, expensive-looking envelope, one that didn't belong anywhere near her modest hallway in her aging, quiet apartment building. Her stomach tightened, she knelt, picked it up, and opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph. A photograph of her, taken from a distance. She was in the cafe, carrying a tray, head slightly bowed, a moment she hadn't even noticed being watched. Beside the photograph, cut out like a headline, were words printed in bold: "The billionaire's new obsession, or a dangerous gold digger." Elena stared at it, her breath slowly leaving her body. Her hands trembled. Not because she was afraid of what the headline meant, but because of what it signaled. Someone had started the attack, someone had decided to make her the target. She sank onto the floor, leaning back against the door as the realization settled. They weren't waiting, they weren't threatening, they were already moving. She closed her eyes, pressing the photo to her chest for a moment, grounding herself. Fear swirled inside her, but beneath it, steady and warm, was the memory of Adrian's arms around her, the way his voice broke slightly when he said she mattered, the way he looked at her like she was the first real thing in his life. That memory steadied her. She stood, changed into warmer clothes, and left her apartment with the envelope tucked into her bag. She wasn't running to Adrian like someone helpless. She was going to him because this was now their battle, not just his or hers. She took a cab to his penthouse. The moment she stepped inside the building, the security guard greeted her by name. Her presence here was no longer unusual, not after she'd visited several times over the past week. But tonight felt different. The elevator ride to his penthouse was quiet, the kind of quiet that filled her with thoughts she wasn't ready to voice. When the elevator doors opened, Adrian was already waiting. He must have been pacing. He only paced when something bothered him deeply. His shoulders were tense, his jaw locked, the usually controlled expression on his face replaced by something raw. "Elena," he breathed when he saw her. "Thank God, you're here." She stepped toward him. "Adrian, something happened." He froze. "What?" She took the envelope from her bag and handed it to him. His eyes darkened the moment he saw the photograph. He didn't even need to read the cut-out words to understand what this was. "Who sent this?" he growled. "I don't know." He clenched the envelope so tightly the edges bent. "Elena," he said slowly, voice trembling with contained fury, "I swear to you, whoever did this." She touched his hand. "I know." But his anger wasn't at her. It was at the world closing in on her, at the people using her to manipulate him, at the shadows he had tried so hard to keep away from her. He wasn't afraid for his business. He was afraid for her. He turned away, pacing again. "I should have anticipated this. I should have gotten you security sooner. I should have warned you in more detail." "Adrian," she interrupted softly, "stop." He did. She walked to him slowly, placing her hands on his arms. "I'm not blaming you." "You should," he said through clenched teeth. "I won't." He met her eyes, and for a moment, Adrian Blackwell, the untouchable billionaire, the cold strategist, the man who never faltered, looked breakable, vulnerable, human. "Let me protect you," he whispered. "You already are," she said. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if letting go would open the door to everything he feared. After a long moment, he gently guided her to the couch. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the moment you found the envelope." She told him. Quietly, clearly. She didn't hide anything. And he listened, not like a CEO gathering information, but like a man listening to the heart of the person he cared about. When she finished, he stood and reached for his phone. "I'm calling my security team. I'm assigning 2 agents to you until we figure out who's behind this." "Adrian, Elena," he said firmly, "this is not negotiable." She looked at him for a moment, weighing his fear against her independence. Then she nodded. "Okay." He exhaled, relieved, but her next words surprised him. "Let me help," she said. "You are helping. You're safe." "No," she shook her head. "I want to be involved. Whatever they're planning, whatever they're doing, I want to know. I want to face it with you." He stared at her, overwhelmed by her steady courage. "Why?" "Because this isn't just your world anymore," she said softly. "It's ours." A slow, dangerous fire lit in his eyes. He didn't reach for her. He didn't kiss her. He just looked at her, as if finally, fully, understanding the depth of what she was choosing. He sat down beside her. "There's something you need to know." "Something Lucas hinted at." She waited. "There's someone on my board," he said. "Someone who wants to replace me." They think I'm distracted. They think I'm vulnerable. His jaw tightened. And they think using you is the fastest way to bring me down. Do you know who? I have suspicions, he said. But I won't point fingers until I have proof. She considered that. Then let's get it. He blinked. Elena, we can't just wait for them to strike harder, she said. We need to know who's behind this. We need to know why. And we need to get ahead of it. He rubbed his forehead. You're not trained for this. This is dangerous. So is everything you've built, she said. But you didn't stop because it was dangerous. You faced it anyway. He looked up at her sharply, surprised by her fire. Elena, he said slowly, you deserve a normal life. One without threats. Without corporate agendas or political games or, I deserve a life I choose, she said. And I choose this. With you. He had no defense against that. No argument strong enough. No logic powerful enough. She broke through every wall he had ever built with a single truth. She wasn't in his life by accident, she was in it because she wanted to be, and that changed everything. He leaned back slowly, exhaling. All right, he said quietly. We face them together. Her lips curved. Good. But first, he said, standing abruptly, you're staying here tonight. She blinked. Adrian, no, he said, his voice brooking no argument. Your apartment isn't secure. Not anymore. She hesitated. I didn't bring anything with me. You won't need anything. That statement made her cheeks warm. Adrian, he smiled faintly. I meant we can pick up something tomorrow. Oh. His smile deepened slightly, rare, soft, and meant only for her. It's not safe for you to be alone, he added. She nodded. Okay. Later that night, after she showered and changed into one of his oversized shirts, they sat together on the couch, her legs tucked under her, his arm along the backrest, their bodies close but not touching. He handed her a cup of chamomile tea. Thank you, she said. You're shaking. A little, she admitted. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You don't have to be brave with me. I know. But she still held herself steady, still met his gaze with quiet strength. He admired her more than he could ever express. Get some rest, he whispered. You too. Impossible. She smiled, and he realized then how deeply he needed that smile. As the night deepened, silence settled between them, not heavy, not fearful, but full of something new, something dangerous, something beautiful. At some point, her head drifted to his shoulder. At another, his hand found hers. And long before midnight, Elena drifted to sleep against him, soft, warm, trusting. But Adrian did not sleep, not even for a second. He watched the photo again, the words cut out from some unknown hand, his jaw tightened, war had been declared, and he wasn't the kind of man who waited to be attacked twice. With Elena asleep in his arms, his voice barely a whisper, he spoke a promise into the darkness, I will find them. And I will end this. The storm had begun, but they weren't going to face it alone anymore. Daniel stood there as if someone had pulled the floor out from under him. For a moment, he genuinely couldn't breathe. The room buzzed around him, clattering plates, murmurs of curious strangers, the soft hum of an expensive espresso machine, but all of it felt distant, muffled, like he was submerged underwater. Only one thing remained sharply in focus, Lily. She stood across from him, breath unsteady, her fingers shaking slightly as she clutched the edge of the table for balance. Her eyes, usually so calm, so unshakably composed, were wide with something raw, fear, hope, disbelief. Maybe all three. I didn't want to tell you like this, she said softly, her voice trembling. I didn't want to tell you at all until I knew, until I was absolutely certain. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. Tell me what? Lily hesitated, glancing at the small envelope on the table between them. The envelope she'd nearly dropped. The one she'd reached for like it was burning her hand. The one he had picked up without thinking, only to freeze when he saw the mark on it, Harrington Capital, embossed in gold. You work for me, he said slowly, still stunned by the realization. Or you used to. Or, I still do, Lily whispered. Just, not the way you think. A dozen thoughts hit Daniel at once, none of them landing cleanly enough to make sense. He stared at her, waiting, feeling every second stretch out impossibly long. Lily exhaled shakily. I'm not just a waitress, Daniel. He blinked, that thin string of calm inside him snapping. Then what are you? She hesitated again, long enough to twist a knife of dread through him, before she finally said the words that would reroute his entire world. I'm the financial consultant Harrington Capital hired 6 months ago. The one they call the ghost advisor. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Hard, the ghost advisor, he repeated, barely believing he was saying it out loud. The one who, Lily, that advisor oversees billion-dollar decision briefs. They adjust the high-risk models. They're the reason we avoided 2 market crashes last quarter. Her eyes flickered with guilt. I know. You're telling me you've been, what, influencing my company from behind the scenes. You're telling me my father's board listens to you. Yes. But you serve coffee. You work double shifts. You take the bus home. What the hell is happening? Lily flinched at his tone, even though he didn't mean it harshly. It came out sharp, stunned, almost accusatory. I work here because I wanted something normal, she whispered. Something real. Something that didn't involve men in suits using me for numbers they don't understand. Daniel stepped back, running a hand through his hair in disbelief. The ghost advisor. The legend. The analyst the biggest firms couldn't even meet face to face. Calls routed through intermediaries. Memos that arrived with no signature. Reports that shifted the direction of whole subsidiaries, and all this time, it was her, the girl who brewed his coffee. Who argued with him about the price of muffins. Who scolded him for checking his emails while she was talking. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice quieter now, but no less